Before we get to the video, I just want to put out a little trigger warning. I will be talking about body dysmorphia, anorexia, and bulimia kind of graphically, so I just want to give you a heads up before you get into the video. Trigger warning. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day. Today I wanted to talk about my eating disorders. I released a poem about a year ago talking about my eating disorders in a kind of subtle way, and I thought when I released the poem at the time that I was in like a healthy space to talk about it, but turns out I wasn't. So when I released the poem, I was going to do a video like this, and then I realized I wasn't quite in the right mindset, so I spent about a year healing and going to therapy and just recovering from all of that, and now I'm really happy to say I'm in a beautiful place, I'm in a healthy place, I'm in a safe place. So I wanted to talk about my eating disorders and my experience, and I just want to kind of open up the conversation because I think it's a really important topic and one that not a lot of people kind of discuss. It's kind of taboo and brushed under the rug, and I just want to start the discussion because I think it's really important to kind of bring light to it. I just want anyone who's also struggling with any sort of eating disorder or body dysmorphia to not feel alone. That was one of my biggest things when I was going through my experience. I felt so alone and alienated and like I was the only one going through this. I hope that you gain something from this video, and I'm happy to sort of, like I said, start the discussion. So without further ado, let's get to it. A couple of weeks ago, I had you all ask me questions on Instagram about my eating disorders, so I'm just gonna go through and answer some of them. I feel like this is a pretty good one to start with. How did it start? It started probably a year or two after I left the show, which is kind of ironic because a lot of people think it started on the show, but it started after I left the show, and that's because when I was on the show, I was dancing pretty much every day except for Sundays. So I was burning so many calories and I was just pretty fit, and I was able to eat whatever I wanted because I was working out every day, so there was no limits to what I could eat because I knew I would burn it off later. But also when you're 11, you don't really think about like burning off food. And then after I left, I didn't really consider that I might have to change my eating habits because I wouldn't be working out as often. So I continued to eat exactly the way I was before, but because I wasn't working out as often, I started to gain more weight. Body dysmorphia really started to become an issue for me. I was unfamiliar with what I saw in the mirror, and it was unacceptable in my eyes because of what society had taught me looked beautiful. My eating disorders started about 2 years after I left the show, so I think I was 15. So it started as bulimia, and then a couple of years later when I moved to LA, which was when I was 18 years old, then the anorexia started a little bit. Last year is when I started to heal and go to therapy and tried to stop those behaviors. The next question is, was your ED ever about gaining control in at least one aspect of your life, parentheses, food? It was about a few things, but a big part of my eating disorders was the control. The emotions and the feeling that came after engaging in bulimia kind of like filled me up in a way I was not feeling at the time. My body dysmorphia was out of this world bad. It only clicked in the past few months that my body doesn't actually look like what I think it looks like. Oh, which is crazy it took this long to kind of kick in, but I am so happy and so grateful I'm in the spot I am now. What were your ED triggers? I can't sit here and like say a list of triggers because I don't even think I know them, but I know a few were like unrealistic expectations. Like my body is just like, I'm built different than other people, and so to expect my body to look like the models I see on Instagram is just like physically impossible. But I would say like seeing that and feeling like I had to look like that was a huge trigger for me. Emotions were a big trigger for me. Like if things were happening in my life and I didn't know how to deal with it, that was a trigger for my eating disorders. If I felt a lot of like self-hatred, that would be a trigger for them. There's a lot of triggers. Did you relapse along the way to your full recovery? When did you start to notice you had an ED? Yes, I did relapse when I was recovering. I relapsed when I was in therapy. I think like after 3 months of participating in therapy, and that's okay. I think something we all need to remember. Just because you become aware of something that triggers you or something negative doesn't mean it's automatically going to be fixed. Like just because I accepted that I had an eating disorder, like eating disorders, and I needed to fix it, that didn't mean that it was automatically fixed just because I was like, hey Chloe, you got some things to figure out. Like that didn't mean it was fixed for me. I got really frustrated with myself every time I did relapse, but I think you have to be gentle with yourself and patient with yourself when you are healing from something like that. Like that's a big thing and you're changing like a big part of your life without even really knowing it. I wish I had a little bit more compassion for myself when I did relapse, but it's okay. Everything happens for a reason. So this is a really good question. Advice for someone who needs help but is scared to reach out because they don't look quote-unquote ill. I would say that's 100% the situation I was in. I didn't really look ill. I constantly told myself that my eating disorders weren't a big deal, like they weren't as severe as other people. So sometimes that is definitely what stopped me from getting help. I would say listen to your heart, because your heart and your soul know that what you're doing is wrong and you're struggling, and just because you don't look ill doesn't mean that you're not suffering. I would say find some self-compassion, some self-respect, and be like, hey, just because I don't look like I'm ill doesn't mean that I'm not in need of help. I can't say that this is the best advice ever. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a life coach, I'm not anything. I'm just someone who has experienced this as well. So, I mean, I wish I would have known that just because I didn't look ill didn't mean that I didn't deserve help. How did you reconcile your body image? Body dysmorphia is something I'm still recovering from, so I feel recovered from bulimia and anorexia. But my body dysmorphia is something I've been working on for like the past year. It's been a slower process than everything else. I think the first step I took reconciling my body image was to take it from a negative point of view to a neutral point of view. So instead of trying to go from like, I hate my body, I hate my thighs, I hate the way I look, I hate my stretch marks, I hate my cellulite, I hate all of this, to neutral about it. This is gonna sound bad, but I would just like not really think about my body a lot. And that's kind of how I got to a neutral place. So it's not really like I was ignoring it and pushing it away. I was just not really thinking about it. My mind wasn't constantly centered around the fact that like my body looked the way like it did. Because I feel like I've changed a lot in the past year mentally, like now I constantly think about things I'm grateful for and I have a lot of gratitude, and like I would just like look at different parts of my body and tell myself I was grateful for them and explain why, and it helped me to see my body in a more positive light. And now I don't want to say like 100% I love every single part of my body, but I love my body. She supports me throughout the day, she loves me, she's working non-stop to keep me healthy, to keep me alive. I'm pretty grateful for her. That was a heavy conversation, but I really am grateful that I was able to share part of my journey with you all. I'm happy I talked about this. I'm happy I was able to sort of open up the conversation about my experience. I just wanted to become a less scary topic so that anyone who is struggling knows that we're all in this together. I am happy to do a part 2 if you all want to hear more about my experience or have any more questions for me. So just let me know on Instagram or wherever if you want to hear more about my eating disorders. But thank you all so much for watching and for listening and for your support. Have a beautiful rest of your day.